Come fall in love as Madison Opera presents Puccini's La Bohème, a celebrated opera about the lives, loves, and losses of young artists in Bohemian Paris. Whether you are new to opera or a longtime fan, don't miss this moving work that audiences have adored for over a century, brought to life by a dynamic young cast. That's November 7th and 9th at Overture Hall. Tickets at madisonopera.org. Back by popular demand, It's a Wonderful Life, a new musical, returns to the Orpheum for one unforgettable performance. This special stage concert experience brings the heartwarming story of George Bailey to life with a lush original score and a timeless message of hope. With book and lyrics by John Atkins and music by Capital City Theater artistic director Andrew Abrams, this is a must-see musical event. Catch the show at the historic Orpheum Theater on November 16th at 2 p.m. Get your tickets today at capitalcitytheater.org. This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Today, cannabis is still illegal in Wisconsin, but hemp-derived THC products are a whole different story. Regulation is lacking, and we're seeing the consequences. With me today to dig into how Madison is navigating the Wild West of unregulated weed and products is City Council President and District 5 Alder Regina Vitiver. Alder Vitiver, welcome to CityCast Madison.
Thanks for having me. And you set it up perfectly.
Wonderful. Yes, there's a lot going on, and you're looking to add some controls, and we're going to talk about that. So you've recently introduced an ordinance that would add some regulation to the sales of hemp-derived cannabinoid products in Madison. Can you tell me what exactly is in your proposal?
Yeah, so really this is an age restriction proposal. So as you said, this is a bit of the Wild West for these products right now. And frankly, when we tell people, yeah, there is actually no age restriction on the sales, they go, wait, what? They're very surprised to hear that. There are no restrictions on the product. So a 13-year-old kid could go into any store, buy a THC-containing product, and there's nothing illegal about it.
Wow.
We hope that most store owners would not sell, but we don't know. And we don't have any way to hold them accountable if they do. So this is about creating an age restriction, setting it at 21, which has parity with alcohol, tobacco, has parity with what Milwaukee has already done for these products, has parity with our adjoining states that have set 21 as the legal age for purchasing cannabis. So it is really just being consistent with everything else that's on the books for an age restriction for a psychoactive product.
So Minnesota, Illinois, they've already done that for 21 and older.
Because they've legalized cannabis, and so those are legal products there, and those are all legal for 21 and up purchase.
Got it. Yeah. That does seem to be like one of the big parts of this proposal I want to dig into a little bit in terms of if there's been any pushback. I also understand, it's looking to have retailers display signs.
So the signage is just to say, just like you would have a signage around tobacco or around alcohol, that these products are restricted to those 21 and up. Again, restricted for sale. And I want to be really crystal clear that this is for sales, not use. So there is nobody who's going to be going out on the street and saying, wow, you look under 21 and you are using a THC product. We're going to cite you and, take it away. That's not happening. This is only about regulating sales.
So really for the retailers.
It's for the retailers. Yep. And then, so as part of this, there will be quite a bit of education for the retailers as well. So education about what these products actually do to the brain, why we want to restrict them to those 21 and up. Developing brains really shouldn't be exposed in an ideal world to psychoactive substances. And so this really is a harm reduction approach to try to help keep particularly our youth healthy.
And was there another component around location for businesses that are selling? Tell me about that.
So there is a piece of it that restricts sales in the area surrounding youth serving locations, so schools, YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, things like that. And we did get some feedback that it would be great to have a little bit more specificity around that. And so that's something that we're taking back and trying to really define what those sites mean in the ordinance so they're clear, so that nobody accidentally goes against them.
Sure, sure. So this is in process right now, this proposal.
Yeah, so it has been through the Economic Development Committee, and they had two recommendations, one of which was to define what the youth serving spaces were. And then the other one was actually increasing the fines for sellers who go against this ordinance. So right now, the fine levels were set fairly, I would say, reasonably. We're not trying to be punitive. It's really, again, more about education. But their recommendation was to actually increase the fines to make it kind of more skin in the game for the retailers. So we're taking that back. And then it will go before the Board of Health on the 5th of November, and then it will come to the Common Council on the 25th of November.
Okay. I do want to take one more beat about the age requirement there. Possession of up to 28 grams of cannabis is decriminalized in Madison for anyone 18 and older. So you talked about we would be in line with other states or adjoining states, and Milwaukee has recently done a 21 years and up. But are there other reasons for setting that 21-year-old restriction? Because I could imagine some people are like, hey, but 18, like why 21 versus 18?
Yeah. Again, it's to really make it so that we have parity and to make it easier for retailers. So if you think about like a Quick Trip, for example, that might sell tobacco and alcohol and THC-containing beverages, then their checkout folks are only looking at one age for all of those items in terms of sales restrictions. So it really is to try to make it so that it is also a little bit easier on the retailers. But it's also in line with what we know about brain development. We have had people give us feedback that we should really raise the age limit to 25 because we know the frontal cortex isn't fully developed until then. And we're like, yeah, that's probably a little bit far. So we'll just keep it at 21. But yes, you did accurately point out that we have decriminalized possession over age 18. And again, there's nothing in this that will change any of that. Again, this is not about possession. It is only about sales.
And what sparked this proposal? Like, there's something about this particular moment. Why now?
So a couple of things have sparked this. So first has been the uptick in overdoses that we're seeing in our emergency departments, particularly among young people. So sometimes it is young children getting a hold of gummies, certainly, but it can be, teens who have acquired these products through a variety of means, and they don't know what the dosages mean. And so they are unfortunately having reactions to them that end them up in the hospital. We also had the situation, I think it was well publicized, about the pizza parlor that accidentally used the THC-infused oil on a pizza and sickened a number of people and sent many of them to the hospital. And public health said, we have no ability to cite the restaurant for this because we have literally nothing in our ordinances around these products. So this is really kind of a first step in kind of creating some of those rules and regulations.
And you're referring to the famous Yetis incident where 8 people under 18 were reportedly intoxicated by cannabis oil.
Yes. And it's no fun to be in that space of having that kind of overdose. It's extraordinarily disconcerting. Some people thought they were having heart attacks. Some people thought they were having strokes.
Yeah, and it's hard for adults even to understand like how one product is going to impact them from the other. And to put a finer point on what you shared about the hospitalizations, according to Public Health Madison and Dane County, from January 2023 to August 2025, Dane County recorded 167 THC-involved EMS calls for people under 21.
Yep. And then the last thing has just been the proliferation of these sites. So there's a couple of spots in Madison where they're particularly prominent. So State Street. And then in my own district, I'm kind of calling it Tobacco Row on University Avenue. And right now we have nothing in the regulation to prohibit them from being so many so close together. Again, this particular ordinance is not going to change that, but this is a first step. And then we will be doing more things later in terms of zoning and licensing to try to get to that density piece of things.
As you said, this is directed at the retailers and how they're showing up. Have you heard any reaction from that group in terms of your suggestion and this proposal?
Yeah, so a lot of the retailers, and I use the term reputable retailers, so retailers that really care about their product, they care about their customers having a really good experience with their product, they want their customers to come back, they are all already restricting folks to 21 and up in their stores. So it's the quote unquote less than reputable retailers that we don't know so much about, and we really don't know what their practices are, and we have concerns. So I honestly think that for most retailers, this is going to be just codifying the practice that they already use. And then for those that aren't doing this already, it will put some guardrails around them and make them more responsible citizens in our community.
What's the ratio roughly about like which retailers are reputable by your definition? Like, is it the majority are reputable, or is it true? Is it actually there's 50-50? What's the landscape looking like? I know they're popping up every day, so I don't expect you to have actual, specific percentages or anything.
So that's a very opinion-based perspective, I would say.
Sure.
So honestly, it is the majority of them that are already doing that. It's truly the minority of them that seem either not to care or, not to be purposefully enforcing it or not making it a priority to enforce it. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
And again, there's nothing to enforce because we don't have an ordinance. So it's just a choice of theirs of who they're selling it to.
Right. You're looking to bring some guardrails and to start the infrastructure around regulation. Have you received any pushback around the proposal? If so, like what kinds?
So personally, I have not received pushback. I have met with a prominent retailer. He said, when I first looked at this, I was really concerned. But then as I dug into it more and had a conversation with you, he's one of the ones that already, again, restricts to 21 and up in his stores. There was one of the news segments that also interviewed a similar type of establishment that also only sells to 21 and up. And his response was just that the distance was maybe a little far. So we'll have to look into that and kind of look on a zoning map and see what it will really impact.
So when you say the distance, you're talking about what's currently under work, that you guys are kind of working on the definition around how close a retailer can be to a youth center space, like a park or a school and that sort of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that person indicated that he thought that it could be a little bit of a tighter distance to give the retailers a little more leeway. And, I think what's hard is we put these distances in ordinance and people don't recognize how short they really are. So, a quarter mile, people typically walk 3 miles an hour. So a quarter mile is about a 5-minute walk for most people.
Yeah. I can think of a few places that sell THC drinks that are close to a park, So would they need to move?
No,
basically? No.
That I was just going to say, so this would not affect any existing retailers. So it would only be new retailers after this point.
Well, I want to take a step back here and talk about the health aspect of this matter, because what folks might not know is that in addition to you being city council president, you have an impressive resume related to public health and medicine specifically, including a PhD in cellular and molecular biology from UW-Madison, and years of professional work overseeing the statewide chronic disease and cancer prevention programs for the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. So from your perspective as a healthcare professional, and you've touched on this a bit, why is it important to keep the THC products out of young hands?
Yeah, so these products, again, are psychoactive. So meaning they change the brain. They bind to the receptors in the brain. They change how we experience life. They can impact brain development. Now, some would argue these aren't as serious as some other products, but that doesn't mean that they aren't impacting. So we really do want to be in this space where we're, again, in a harm reduction space. So teenagers are going to experiment. They're going to experiment with alcohol. They're going to experiment with tobacco. They're going to experiment with THC or cannabis. We know these things, but let's just reduce the chance of them doing that. When we set the age limit for 21 for alcohol, the number one thing that happened was highway accidents went down. So that's not related to brain development, but the point is that it was a harm reduction technique. And so all of these types of regulations are really in that vein of how do we reduce harm to the community from these products that really should only be used by a consenting adult.
And because you are a medical whiz, I want to take this one step farther. I think a lot of people think about THC and they think, it's calming. It's not as dangerous as alcohol, but actually there's a lot of evidence that it can be quite damaging to the brain.
It depends on the person, really. So different people really have different effects from these products. So some people, like you said, it can be very calming. And for those people, it might be part of, a stress relief mechanism that they choose to use, again, as consenting adults. For other people, though, it can induce paranoia. So particularly for folks with other underlying, mental health conditions, it can actually really exacerbate things and cause some significant problems. So again, we want to make sure that the people who are using these products know what they're using and know what to expect from their use. So some people have asked us, well, why aren't we right off the bat regulating what's in these products? And the answer is it's a lot harder. And our plan is to do things in a stepwise manner. And the age restriction is step 1. And we'll go to licensing and zoning in step 2, ideally, assuming this passes the council. And then the vision is for step 3 to be doing some testing of products so that people do know what they're getting.
You've been talking about this ordinance as a step for harm reduction. And I'm curious, in what ways does our city and state's lack of THC regulation put people of all ages at risk?
So one of the benefits of legalizing cannabis, and THC is from the cannabis plant, it's just a different percentage, and it's typically concentrated, so you are really getting the same drug that you're getting when you're imbibing in cannabis. And so for the states that have legalized it, there's also very tight regulations about it. So you have legalized growers, legalized distributors, and there's tax revenue, which is also a real benefit to the state. But the other thing is that the consumer knows what they're getting. With the THC products that are on the market right now, right here today in Madison, in the state of Wisconsin, nobody knows what they're getting. Theoretically, they are supposed to be able to be overseen by DATCP, Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. But, does DATCP have the resources to go out and check all these products? They do not. As you said at the very outset, this is the Wild West for these products. So again, you have those reputable retailers who are like, I have a product. I know what's in my product. I want it to be a good product. I want people to want to come back. I care about my customers. And then we have folks who are selling who knows what.
Yeah, so there are a lot of good actors out there, a lot of reputable retailers, and they're being harmed by the lack of regulations. And in terms of the conversations I've been having on this show, that was the majority opinion. Like there was a chorus on just that the safety of the products themselves are under question without regulation, and that impacts them even if they're doing the right thing.
Right, because you can imagine if you're a retailer that does take pride in your product, and then somebody goes and gets a different product somewhere else. And now they're like, well, I don't ever want to have any of these products again. Now you've lost that customer because of the bad experience they've had with somebody else's product. It is concerning about some of the things that can be in these products.
And you touched on this briefly already, but this proposal that we're discussing around the age limit and keeping these products out of younger hands, that this is a first step. How are you seeing this rolling out? How long down the line would we be getting to a place where, manufacturers would be feeling the pressure to raise the standards and have a quality standard?
That's probably a long way in the distance. For the next step that we're talking about is licensing and zoning. So right now you need to have a license to sell alcohol. You need to have a license to sell tobacco products. You do not need a license to sell THC products. So we don't even know everywhere in the city where these products are sold. So that's part of the issue. So we will go to licensing, but part of that is going to be then we're going to need to have some sort of review. So that's probably, in my opinion, it means that we're going to go from an alcohol licensing and review committee to a intoxicating substance licensing and review committee. And so that will mean changing the ordinances for that review committee. So it's just a little bit more complicated of what we have to do to get to a licensing space. So that's going to take us a little while longer. And then testing is sort of the next step after that. And that will have to involve a cost to the retailer. So we have to make sure that we're setting those costs not too high, but enough so that we can actually perform the tests and then get them the results back. I'm going to say when, not if, Wisconsin does decide to legalize cannabis, because I personally think it's just a matter of time. But if we have all of these things in place, then we will be all set to be able to allow those products to be sold as soon as they're legalized at the state level, and will be possibly far ahead of other local communities because we will have had that infrastructure in place already.
Is there anything else missing from the conversation when it comes to legalizing cannabis in Wisconsin that you'd like to set straight?
I'm just going to share my own personal opinion. So when I started at the Wisconsin Division of Public Health 8 years ago, That was when there were a whole bunch of spice deaths. So spice is this synthetic marijuana pretend kind of thing. And that moment changed my own personal perspective on the legalization of marijuana. Because before that, I was like, oh gosh, I don't think this should be legalized. I think it's really the wrong thing to show people. But that moment with those deaths showed me that, no, legalization is a harm reduction approach. Because again, what it does is it creates a space for these to be legal products, to have them regulated so everybody knows what's in them. They know what dosage they're getting. So when you pick up a bottle of beer, it tells you what % alcohol it has in it. And that's because of regulations. You're not picking up a bottle of antifreeze, which you might have been doing during Prohibition, when there was prohibition of alcohol, but no regulation. So the regulation is, in and of itself, a harm reduction approach. So that's my personal perspective on why I happen to think legalization of cannabis makes sense from a public health perspective. It also makes sense from a fiscal perspective, because once you can tax these items, then you can also use that money for education on harm reduction, right? Who should be using these products, who shouldn't be, what is a reasonable dosage, what to do if you do overdose. And having that education in the community helps considerably.
And so you were actually quite moved by that experience, enough that you are putting this proposal forward.
I would say that I'm putting this proposal forward because of the situation that we're in now with, as you said, lots of youth overdoses and, really proliferation of potential bad actors in the environment who are interested in making a profit and not necessarily interested in the health of our community.
Well, I'm feeling heartened by understanding this better, and you've done such a clear job of laying it out for us. Your ordinance is currently just a proposal, as we've said. You mentioned it's scheduled to return to the council for a vote November 25th. Do you anticipate it passing?
I have learned to not predict things at the council because there are things that I think are so common sense, and then something happens and I go, what? So I hope it will pass. To me, it seems logical, reasonable, and not overly oppressive in terms of a regulation. And so I would hope that my colleagues would sign on to it. But I don't know. It's 20 people, and you never know how 20 people are going to wind up making up their minds.
We'll wait and see. And, very curious if it does go forward, kind of those next steps and how this infrastructure continues to build out, if it is the path that our city takes. So it's great to talk to you, Alder Regina Vitiver, our own City Council President and District 5 Alder. Thank you for taking the time and educating us on this issue.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing these podcasts and helping the city understand about what's going on.
That's City Council President Regina Vitiver. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm your host, Bianca Martin. Don't forget, you can always support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. And if you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with someone who's interested in local politics and how we take care of our public health? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care and thanks for listening.